Good evening. Welcome to the Mom to Mom Show, brought to you live by ECRC on the Chaldean Moms of Metro Detroit page. I'm Lisa Denho with my co-host Russia Kesto, and today we're here to talk about foster care and adoption.
We have two guests joining us today, Heather Keshamoon, who's a biological mother, adoptive mother, and foster care mother, and Marla Garmo, who is a licensed social worker for over 10 years. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
I know I gave you guys a little bit of an intro, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourselves?
Sure. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
So my name is Marla Garmo. I've been a social worker for 13 years now. My entire career has been working in foster care, working in the foster care system. Currently, I run a program at Wayne State University where I work with students that spend time in foster care. Prior to that, I was a foster care worker for 7 years in Macomb County through the Department of Health and Human Services.
My name is Heather Moon. I've been married to my husband Robert for 21 years. We have 5 children. 3 of them are my biological children. I have an adopted daughter, and I also have a foster son. So I'm a working mother, and I also volunteer for various ministries in ECRC and the Office of Life.
Nice. Recently, ECRC hosted a foster care and adoption session for people to learn more about foster care. Can you guys give us a little recap about the event and about the Office for Life?
Yeah, sure. About a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, Bishop Francis started a new initiative called the Office of Life, where he called together different people from the community to kind of work around different areas that impact life issues. So really from womb to tomb. And so I was invited to participate because of my professional career in foster care to just really kind of bring some awareness and some advocacy around that. So we attended a session here at ECRC for some parents that are struggling with some different issues, and we spoke about how the call to being a foster parent could satisfy some vocations for some of these parents that were there.
Yeah. And there was we also had adoption associates there at that, and they were an advocacy for adoption. And we also had 3 couples giving their testimonies. Myself and my husband giving our testimony of foster care and adoption, but we also had 2 other couples, one who fostered to adopt and another one who did domestic adoption as well, just to give different perspectives on the testimonies.
Yes. Heather, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the foster care system?
Yeah, so it honestly wasn't anything that ever crossed my mind when I was raising my 3 biological children, nothing I ever thought about, but it was in 2019 where Father Pierre told me that, there's Chaldeans in the foster care system. And I'll be honest, it was a big shock. And I, just like people hearing now for the first time, what does that mean? Like we have big families, are you sure? And he bluntly and gently told me that, Heather, you're living under a rock. That's Father Pierre for you. And I was, and I lived in my bubble. But honestly, it really stirred my heart because I just thought about, a Chaldean child who was pulled away from their family, no fault of their own, and then being put into in a different environment, a different family. And I just felt a Chaldean child would do better in a Chaldean home, at least in the culture and the religion and language and so forth. So that's what started my journey, and I obviously, there's a lot of discernment and talking with family and husband, but that's what started my journey and the licensing process for foster care and adoption.
Very nice. Can you tell us a little bit about the licensing process?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make a distinction because I think that one of the things that is often confusing to people is what does it actually mean to be in foster care? So legally, what it means to be in foster care is that you were temporarily removed from your biological parents and out of home placement is the language that we use. And so when we think about Chaldeans, we're like, why wouldn't Chaldeans go with a relative? Well, that still could mean that they're in foster care. So foster care could include many different types of placement. It could include being with a relative like grandma or auntie or whoever, or it could be with a licensed foster home, or it could be in, what we call, congregate care facilities or group homes. So it could be any number of placements. So the idea of foster care doesn't necessarily mean you have to be placed in a foster home. It could be, a number of different placements. So I think that that's often why people get confused, because they're like surprised. What do you mean that there isn't family to take them? And we'd love to believe that there's always family to take children, but sometimes that's not the case, and that's why we do need foster parents. They get licensed.
And then for me, when I got started, honestly, I didn't know where to start. And luckily now on the Office of Life webpage, we do have references of how to get started. But I first started with calling Marla, and I, even though our families knew each other, I didn't reveal my name just yet, because I'm like, let me make sure this is something I really want to do. So she gave me a little bit of information. I also talked to Christina Thomas, who's another foster mom who's fostered two adopted children, just to get some perspective. And she got licensed through an agency called Enna Center for Children. So I just decided, okay, let me start with the process. I went to orientation. Generally, they say it takes about 6 months. I have known people that it's happened in 3-4 months, though. It was during the pandemic when I got licensed, so that's why it took a little bit longer. But, it involves a lot of paperwork, sharing your family's medical records, financial records. They do a home study, and, they inspect the home. You got to make sure the beds are ready. But you can put in your license like a criteria of what you're open to. It could be an age, right? Maybe some people are only open to under 2 years old. For me, I put that it was only open to Chaldean children. So when I do get a call, it would be only if there was a Chaldean child in the foster care system.
We actually have our first question, and I want to encourage viewers to please, if you have any questions to ask, do it through the feed. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I do believe that this was partially answered. What is step one to becoming a foster parent, and where does one begin? Maybe we can share how they can get in touch with the ECRC group.
So if you go onto the Office of Life website, you could see some different contact information. So we actually made a connection with a licensing worker, a Chaldean social worker that works for Oakland County Department of Health and Human Services. And it doesn't matter where you live, but you can contact Zena, and she will get you started on the licensing process, which usually involves an orientation. So it's like an introduction to what the process looks like, because when children are placed into foster care, there is a standard that the state of Michigan and the courts are going to require for their care. So it's a kind of an invasive process to become a licensed foster parent. I mean, we want to know, do you have criminal history? Do you have, mental health challenges? Do you have financial problems that, are going to prevent you from being able to care for this child? So, yeah, it is a pretty invasive process, but it's meant to establish a standard of care for these children, because obviously when all of these systems are involved in their care, the courts, the child welfare system, all of this, there has to be an expectation that it's above and beyond sort of like what the average standard is, right, for people just living in the community. So that's how it starts. So that's what we are recommending, is really just going to Zena, and she will really be a familiar kind of person to talk to and explain to you what the process is like, and if this is something that you really want to do and take on this this beautiful challenge. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So
the website is life.chaldeanchurch.org. And we also have an email called fostercare@chaldeanchurch.org. So even if there's any general questions, we can connect you to different people. Even if you want to connect with any other previous foster parents, we would connect you to them, general questions. But I just would encourage any questions, any just nudges, go to the website. And if you're ready for licensing, we recommend, again, Zena's contact information is on the website, to contact Zena and start the orientation.
That's good to know. Actually, the viewer has a few more questions. One asking if they're not ready to be foster parents, is there any way they could be supportive of parents that are fostering, and how they can help with this? And then what is the biggest misconception about becoming a foster parent?
I'll let you take the first one about the how to help.
There are a lot of ways that you can help. I think of, just like how you would help any of your family members, if there's football practice and they need help with transportation, if there's, a meal that you could share, or, offer to take the kids to a movie. I mean, those are, some simple ways that you can help, but there's also other ways, there's getting involved. If you feel called to maybe helping a teenager, you can get involved as a mentor, and go through an agency to kind of get your background checked and all that, but you could take on this, role of being a mentor to a child in foster care, and maybe teach them how to drive, or, help them get their first job, or help them with a resume. So if you think of what it takes to raise a child, and any of those experiences that you would do for your own child or your niece or your nephew is a way that you could support. Of course, obviously, if you're connected to a foster parent, it's a little bit easier to do that, but we don't want, like random people getting involved, because we also want to protect these kids. So a lot of people have the right idea and they have the right heart to want to help, but we just have to always, be mindful that we have to keep these kids safe and protect them. So we won't let strangers, do all this stuff. But, getting involved in our community is a great way to get started. There's always opportunities for volunteering. And if you email that, the fostercare@chaldeanchurch.org, and there's something that you feel called to wanting to help, you just let us know, and we'll find a way to, help a child in foster care.
How about the question of what is the biggest misconception of becoming a foster parent?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say like a lot of, if I think of some of the negative comments kind of that came my way, as well as like, aren't you afraid you're going to bring trouble into the house? Aren't you afraid, it's going to be too hard on the kids, and your kids, it'll affect the kids in a negative way. But I will say, like, I just to watch my biological children and how they've grown, not only just from a maturity perspective, spiritually. I mean, I've really, and not to say there was never any conflict in the house, or just like with any sibling relationship, but I've honestly seen my kids grow to be better people, because of it. So I think that was one of the misconceptions. And the other thing about, you're going to bring trouble into your house, or just assuming, they're all troubled children, and, it's like just they like insinuate almost like the children are like damaged goods. And that honestly hurts me, like to be like, because they've been through so much. And yes, they've came with some wounds, right? They've obviously, got removed from their parents' home, or, maybe there was something else that happened, abandonment, rejection, whatever else. Yes, there's wounds there. But then, we get to be part of their healing process too, and bring love and God back into their lives. And you so quickly see just how they transform. I mean, not even just with, my foster children, I've seen other foster children, and I've seen literally within days, within months, a complete transformation. Yeah. And obviously it's always a work in progress, but like when they have love and stability and brought back into the culture, it's just a beautiful transformation to see.
Well, nice to also be the one that's able to offer that to them.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I kept hearing over and over is, I don't know that I could love a child that is not my own, like my own biological children. Because I think when all of us started hearing this, we started to talk amongst our own groups, like, would you adopt children, even if you have your own? And we started having these conversations, or like one would say I could, but their spouse said I could never. So how did you process that? How about your husband? Was he on board from the beginning? And
yeah. So first of all, with my adopted daughter, when she came into our house, her parents had already lost rights. So we knew from the beginning, they were asked, are you open to sign an intent to adopt? And we were, and we did. So we knew from the beginning she was going to be our adopted daughter, right? And I'll just say, like, God gave me a grace that I can't explain. It was like a divine grace, like for me to love her as if it's God's love. And I really did, just an overwhelming love I had for her. And I can absolutely say I love her like my daughter. And even, with my foster child, who I knew, was seeing his parents, and I had to, be supportive of that. Obviously, you protect your heart in a different way, because okay, not to say I stopped myself from becoming attached from him and loving him like my son, I absolutely treat him like my son. And he absolutely feels like he's part of the family. I mean, my daughter from day one called me mom and dad. They called mom dad because she knew. With my foster son, obviously the parents were still in the picture. He calls us Auntie Heather and Uncle Robert, right? So it feels like relatives. It feels like family. It just, there's such a strong connection there. And I call him my Bonnie. He's my Bonnie, I absolutely treat him like my son and love him like my son.
Did your kids struggle at all in the beginning with the idea of it, or were they open to it, or their relationships, are they kind of like how all siblings are nowadays? Because I know I saw your guys' testimonies today on Instagram, and I just thought they were so beautiful to read.
Yeah. So, I mean, before any of the children came in our house, so I had my biological daughter who just was so ecstatic and she couldn't wait. My oldest son maybe was a little bit more indifferent, okay. And then my youngest son was the most reluctant, he didn't want to share his Xbox room, It was more like that,
baby,
right?
yeah.
He's a baby. But honestly, I saw him transform the most. It's just amazing to see his compassion, his love. And yeah, it's just at first he was like, what? I didn't sign up for this, but just wouldn't ask your children, am I allowed to get pregnant,
Right.
Yeah, but obviously we respected them, we talked to them, we made them understand everything. And they came on board, and not to say there wasn't struggles and an adjustment period or conflict, and just like with any siblings, right? They very soon just became regular siblings who fight over, you took my sweatshirt, to clean the bathroom, typical things like that. But honestly, the way they have each other's back and protect each other is just so beautiful to see them all get along together.
I mean, I think that's really a testament to your and Robert's parenting, truly, to raise such, amazing kids.
They're also a work in progress.
Yeah, well, I mean, they'll get there eventually, right?
I beg to differ. Everyone who knew you were coming on, they're living saints on
Yes.
earth. Yeah.
Work in progress.
We do have a question from Summer Yono. Is it true that if you foster a child that they can't be younger than your youngest biological child?
That's not a rule. That's what we say is best practice. So it's always a way to keep your children safe to have the foster child be younger than your youngest biological child, just because of a power dynamic, right? An older kid could potentially, maybe harm a child that's younger than them. So you wouldn't want to necessarily bring that in. But certainly, foster parents have adopted or fostered children that were older than their own, and just put in some really good safeguards to keep their kids safe.
Yeah, and it's not a rule. My adopted daughter is a little bit older than my youngest biological son. I mean, they're about 10 months apart. They're a grade apart, but they're about 10 months apart. And then, but my foster son was younger than all the other kids in the house.
Yeah.
When the children are brought into the home, are there therapists that are helping? If they had trauma in the past, Marla, you could speak with that. What resources do the foster parents get to help with the transition?
Yeah, so when you become a foster parent, a licensed foster parent, you're provided a financial stipend, and the children are, if they don't already have health insurance, are given state Medicaid. So there are resources, immediately to ensure that they can, get checked out by a dentist, a doctor, make sure that they have all of their needs met, food, shelter, clothing, all of that stuff. So it's really, dependent on the child. Some children, obviously, it may be not as traumatic of an experience when they enter foster care because they go to grandma, and so it's a little bit more what they're used to. In some cases, it's a little bit more, obviously traumatic, where they will need to have, some support during that. So it would be up to the foster parent to connect them with a therapist. And of course, the foster care worker is going to help, but, sometimes foster parents have people that they know that they go to that they are reliable. So it really just kind of depends on the situation. But certainly, there shouldn't be any barrier to being able to get that, those services in place.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter at the time, she, early on, just as part of the transition, had a therapist. My foster son now has a therapist, and I chose Chaldean therapists for them.
Okay.
One question, what should people know or discern before they consider becoming a foster parent?
Yeah, I think discerning is a very big point. Well, first of all, I think, just being open and having awareness, right? So that's the first step. Is I think some people are blind to it and not even wanting to know and take the next step, right? So the first thing is just learn, get informed, right? Maybe go to the orientation, maybe talk to one of the other foster parents and get their perspectives on it. Marla was a wealth of information for me as well. So, get informed. Obviously, getting on the same page with your spouse, right? Maybe not all the time, and I get this a lot too. Sometimes one spouse is on board and the other one is not. So a lot of open conversations around that. Just a funny story about, not necessarily funny, but another foster parent that ended up getting licensed, she was fully on board and wanted to do it, and then her family was not. Actually, this is the family we're going to feature next week on our Office of Life Instagram. And, she accepted, okay, her husband doesn't want to do it, but she went and prayed straight to Mother Mary. Mary, if you want this, please let this happen. That night, her husband had a dream and woke up the next morning and it's like, let's go, we got it, where's the paperwork, So it's go to prayer, and just a lot of conversations, but it's honestly, it is a discernment, you have to see if it's truly, it is a calling and what's best fit